The Objective. To deliver the NBA to you like no other. News. Play breakdowns. Power rankings. Storylines you never hear talked about. Anywhere else. It's all straight shots here. Fired by straight shooters. S and Gun. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast, where I am joined by Lauren Gunn. She's back, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, hello. Oh, God.
Hello, hello. How are you?
This NBA season is becoming so exhausting. It is so hard to keep up. And it is just one day after another. Every day, there's something. Every day.
Every day. Yeah. And look, there was a lot of great basketball over the weekend. Suns Mavericks was entertaining. Lakers Warriors was great. The obviously the game that we talked about, the Knicks Celtics. Actually, sorry, we haven't talked about that yet for you listeners. We will be getting to that in a couple of minutes. We had a Knicks beat reporter on the podcast. You will be able to listen to him in like literally 5 or 10 minutes, so just bear with us for a second. But the story that really caught everybody's attention, it was discussed ad nauseum, maybe not ad nauseum, but it was discussed a ton over the weekend, was Ja Morant. He has been, quote unquote, suspended, if you will. Shams Charania has said suspended. Others said he's away from the team, but he is going to be away from the Memphis Grizzlies for at least a couple of games after he was on IG Live in a gentleman's club, if you will, brandishing a gun. And obviously this is serious. The NBA is taking it seriously. The Memphis Grizzlies, from what we've seen, are taking it seriously. Ja Morant himself released a statement saying that he apologizes to the team, to the organization. Very much so one of those, generic PR statements that you see from a lot of teams and a lot of, if you work in PR, if you've done even a PR class, you'll know that is a very generic cookie cutter type of statement. Lauren, for me, and this has been mentioned a lot, Ja Morant is in a position where the on-court stuff, what he does on the basketball court, what he is as a leader, what he is to the Memphis Grizzlies, to the city of Memphis, really, is undeniable. Everything that he's done so far has been pristine. He's obviously now a Nike athlete. He has his own signature shoe. The same day that the news dropped about him brandishing a gun, he actually got introduced as a Powerade athlete. So he is going to be one of the faces of the NBA moving forward. But the off-the-court stuff, which hasn't got a lot of attention over the last couple of months, but there has been reports of, an incident occurring between the Indiana Pacers and the Memphis Grizzlies, and some of Morant's entourage is now banned from coming to Grizzlies games. There was the situation that, is still ongoing with the teenager at an open basketball run, and now obviously the NBA is going to investigate that as well, but there have been multiple situations here with Ja Morant that have been reported, and now this. So to me, it just goes back to how much are you willing to keep alive the dream that you have of being a professional basketball player and potentially being one of the greatest players in the NBA right now versus, the other stuff.
Right.
What's your read on this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still kind of like processing and trying to understand, because to me, this situation has there really is so much gravity and stuff that comes with it. And so I'm still curious to see what happens with the investigation. If my brother actually sent me, I didn't get a chance to see it. Well, I mean, I did see it, but I didn't see it when it aired. Jalen Rose, I thought, had a really, really good take, and not even a take, but what he had to say on this situation. If you haven't heard it, I would encourage you to go find it, because I think when you have the fame and you're surrounded and you're that, there's just so much that comes with the NBA fame and just being like a celebrity in some sense. There's so much that goes into it. And I don't mean that to be like, oh, these are excuses for this behavior. I don't believe that at all. But I do think that, having open conversations and trying to, make right on certain things is the way to go always. And so I would encourage anyone to go listen to what Jalen Rose had to say, because I thought it gave some perspective that I certainly didn't have. And I think it starts the conversation, and I think that you need to kind of grow from, I think everybody kind of needs to, not everybody, but I think you got to be able to take this because he mentioned Ja Morant is still a kid. He's still a kid. And so, I mean, he's an adult and he's fully, responsible for his actions, but you've got to, you gotta grow. There's no tolerance for what we're seeing. And it's dangerous. It's crazy because just a couple of weeks ago, it was All-Star weekend and they're unveiling this massive shoe. Everyone saw the ice sculpture, like all this money that Nike poured into that announcement. I was
there. I was dying.
It was unreal.
Yeah,
I
was trying to get that
anything
sneaker.
Like
it was
that.
hard.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing.
I agree.
So I'm kind of waiting to see how this is all going to unfold. But it's you can't understate the gravity of the situation, especially when the NBA does have a massive cultural impact for setting examples to kids, to young girls, to young boys who are wanting to play the game. Those factors cannot be overlooked. So we'll see.
I agree. And you know what? I've seen some people on Twitter use this where it's like, oh, well, he's a basketball player. He's not a role model. He's not supposed to. You shouldn't be looking towards basketball players to be your role models. But I very much so disagree with that line of thinking, because at the end of the day, when you're in the public eye, when you're a public figure, you have a responsibility, not just to yourself, not just to your family, not just to the people that you support, but to the audience that is actually watching you. I think you have that responsibility, and that's what comes with fame, man. Like that's the massive weight that you have to put on your shoulders. And a lot of these athletes do. A lot of these athletes do it successfully. You look at like players like LeBron James who use their platforms for good and whatnot. But then there's situations like this where a young player, again, not making excuses for it, but he is a young player, probably in an impressionable situation where he's made a lot of friends in the city or whatnot. And now he is stuck in a situation where maybe his entourage, like, man, I'm not going to say I've been in situations like Ja Morant's, but I have been that impressionable kid. I have been that impressionable kid in a situation where I realized, oh man, I am not really supposed to be here or be doing, you know what I mean? So like,
exactly.
Personally, I sympathize with that aspect of things. And I think Jalen Rose hit it right on the head, where he's talking about, look, man, like there have been other players that have been in your shoes, that have been in your situation, and don't waste your career because of this situation. Don't, and like, not to be understated, and we've mentioned it a couple times now, but he is legitimately going to be one of the faces of the entire NBA. One of the faces of the entire NBA. When you have that platform, when you're being, touted like that, you have a responsibility to yourself. You have a responsibility to your teammates. You have a responsibility to your coaches, to the organization that boasts you, and also to the audience that is watching you. That's just truthful. Remember last season or the year before that, where there was a kid who was crying, and Morant came and gave him a signature on his jersey, and then they went off. And then there was the other kid who was in a Warriors jersey, and then they swapped it with a Morant jersey. They actually did a giveaway.
The whole promotion,
Right. Understand how kids in Memphis look up to you. So I guess that's my thing. It's like, look, you have a responsibility, not just to yourself, not just to the people that are around you, but to the people who are idolizing you. People will genuinely be idolizing Ja Morant as he moves forward in his career. And that's the responsibility he has to keep in mind when he gets himself in trouble like this. So I really do hope this is a wake-up call in a major way for him to spark some kind of change in his life, whether it be with his crew or himself or whatever. I just hope that's the change. That's it.
Yeah. Really. I'm with you there.
Yeah, I we'll see. Obviously, it's an ongoing story. We'll see if the NBA decides to levy any other suspensions, or if the Grizzlies end up extending that suspension, if you will. If there's any fines to come, et cetera, et cetera. If there's more investigative, reports that come out, obviously we'll be updating you here on the Objective Basketball Podcast as well. This obviously has a massive impact in the Western Conference standings as well, whether it be, the Grizzlies might slide a little bit with Brandon Clark missing the rest of the season. That's another huge aspect of this. Dylan Brooks being suspended for a game because of the technical foul thing. The Grizzlies are not in the greatest state right now, to say the least, and they are the second best team in the Western Conference according to records. So we'll see what happens. We'll see how this all transpires and how this affects the team. Shams Charania had just reported that Steven Adams held a players-only meeting for the Grizzlies, and apparently a lot of his comments were directed towards Morant, towards this situation. So hopefully, Adams being a veteran in the locker room is that wake-up call. Hopefully that's the guy who can kind of get that message to him in a proper way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Steven Adams, I'm glad you brought it up, because to me, Steven Adams, yes, he's a veteran, but he's also somebody that it's been in multiple different situations, and he has the reputation and the respect of a lot of people just because, not just because, but staying in the league and, again, having success in different situations is not something that's easy to do, and it warrants a lot of respect. So I'm curious to see kind of how that unfolds, and if we see that kind of being this moment of this team rallying together and kind of trying to, overcome some adversity, or if it's something that only kind of adds to the strain and just is sort of another thing that they're having to overcome and deal with and ends up moving them in the wrong direction. That's what I'm going to be looking at over these next few weeks here with the Memphis Grizzlies.
It's always like this with these young teams, man. You only need a couple of things to go wrong for a couple of these young guys to feel differently. Steven Adams has actually been a part of a situation like that. You think of OKC, right? And where they were at with Westbrook and Durant and Harden, and then that dissipated because, this guy's getting paid more than me. This guy's getting more touches than me, et cetera, et cetera. I can't win with this guy. Now, those were all basketball-related issues, right? With the Grizzlies, It seems to be an off-court issue, because it seems like the on-court chemistry, everything that's happening on the basketball court is more than awesome, but the off-court stuff is the question. And again, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the Memphis Grizzlies. We're going to switch over to the Eastern Conference now, where we are talking about the New York Knickerbockers. They have been exceptional. They just won in double overtime against the Boston Celtics in what was an incredible game, Lauren. It was exhilarating. We have our guy, Kris, jumping on right now to talk to us about the Knicks and everything related to the Madison Square Garden loving. I would love to go to a game in MSG, by the way. Haven't gone yet. Soon will. But yeah, let's get into our conversation with Kris. It was a good one. Talked all things Knicks. Let's do it. Want to bet? Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN, or in Ontario, download the app using the QR code on your screen. 19 plus, please play responsibly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by a guest, a Knicks guest, because obviously the New York Knicks are absolutely rolling right now. This is a New York Knicks beat writer for WFUV Sports, Kris, I'm going to get the last name right. I promise you. Pursiainen. Pursiainen. Yeah.
Bang. There it is.
Let's go. It took a little bit, but it's okay.
Listen, every good project requires some groundwork, some foundation setting.
You know what's funny? I've been where you are in your shoes. Someone just says like S. Barahan. Yes. How are you, sir? So how you doing, man? Look, the Knicks are rolling right now, so I imagine you're in good spirits. Winners of 9 in a row. They pulled off a huge double overtime win against the Celtics last night, which was an excellent game to top off a Sunday that was just so many great basketball games yesterday. They have the fourth best record in the league since January 1st. I guess just to start off this podcast, Knicks-centric, what do you think has been the main catalysts for change since the turn of the calendar? Because they've looked, they were good to start the season, but they've looked even better now.
I think, not to bust your date range, but I think you got to pull a little bit less than a month out further than that new year. Go to December 4th. I think that was the first day the Knicks unveiled their new look rotation. Now, I've been on the record several times as saying that I've heard from those very familiar with the situation that the front office had a big hand in those rotation changes. Derrick Rose out of a Tom Thibodeau rotation doesn't seem like something Tom Thibodeau would do voluntarily, right? So playing Deuce McBride, definitely a downgrade, but what he brought to the defense in terms of his ability to play Thibodeau's scheme ended up making that worth it. That ended up not mattering when the Knicks said, hey, we've got a bunch of picks in this draft anyway. We're going to trade one of these. Let's just do it now and start, reaping the benefits of it already. They picked up Josh Hart by coupling that pick with someone who kind of soured out of Thibodeau's favor and didn't make it in the rotation. So I think that right there is like a little background theme of the Knicks front office. They're always going to fix their mistakes, but do something else while they're at it. They used 6 second-round picks to dump Burks, Noel, and Walker. They lost a 7th because of the tampering charge.
Right.
But Jalen Brunson is on the Knickerbockers and has had the effect that you've seen him have this season on guys like Julius Randle, on the team as a whole. And it's been more than worth it, as many would agree. So that's a little side note. But I think that rotation switch, the front office playing their veteran signings and then saying, hey, those guys that we voluntarily paid a lot of money for, they're not good at basketball. Let's stop playing them. Hey, Tibbsy, you want to keep your job? You're going to do this, this, and this. And he was like, okay. And so because Thibodeau and Rose have such a good relationship, this is the stuff you heard writers wax poetic about like 3 years ago. And you all were like, like, who cares that Tibbs and Leon have a good relationship? Like this is just nepotism at its finest. And then you look to like how Thibodeau's tenure exploded in Chicago because of distance between him and the front office. And you look to how Thibodeau's tenure exploded in Minnesota because he was the front office. And you look now in New York and he is tightly working with the front office that has his back. Once the team started winning games off of their rotation changes, a couple articles came out at a coincidental time that Thibodeau was doing a fantastic job with the team. And yeah, like the team has got his back. They know what to do to have his back. They also think he's a good coach. They just understand that his inability to evaluate talent unbiasedly, and by that I mean when he has these guys in the building playing for him every day, he has a tough time being like, hey, Derek, you actually don't belong in this rotation. It's not for the best of the team. I understand that personally. I think it's a flaw. I think it's a big detriment to his case as a top head coach in the league. I don't think those conversations need to be had. I think he can just be top 10, top whatever, and that's cool.
Hey, by the way, I'm just going to throw it out here because you mentioned it, December 4th. So I went back. I pushed it a little bit. They are the third best record in the entire league since December 4th. So since those rotation changes, they are 29-14. Only the Nuggets and the Bucks have a better record than them. So
you have a point differential. Do you have a point differential filter there?
Do I have a point differential for you? They have I believe they have the second best net rating in the entire NBA since that point.
There it is.
Other than the Denver Nuggets. So yeah, they've been like, listen, we're moving stuff, but it works to your advantage. I think
larger sample size. Come on.
Yeah, larger. Yeah, exactly. It's a larger sample size. It works better. Honestly, I think to your point about Tibbs, the more interesting aspect of this maybe to me is the fact that he has aligned himself, like you mentioned. He's focused a little bit more on what will work with this team. We see Quickly having minutes. We see Grimes having minutes. Obviously, Hart working along. My question for that is, I guess this is the tough part here. They're the fifth best offense in the league. Okay, and what they're doing to generate that offense is interesting. Randle and Brunson, they're elite ISO scorers. They're both near the top of the league when it comes to isolation scoring. They get a lot of second chance opportunities. They're a great rebounding team with Randle and Robinson, right?
That's the big one, is offensive rebounding. Hart, Quickly, Robinson,
right?
Randle, Sims, Hartenstein, whoever it is, like that's a competitive advantage that I think they've attacked by design.
Tibbs is like that. Like that's the type of stuff that he loves to, I mean, you go back to the Chicago Bulls, it's Joakim Noah, it's Todd Gibson, it's those guys, right? Like he loves that type of stuff. Do you think though that is a sustainable recipe that could potentially work in the playoffs with Brunson and Randall creating off of ISOs, plus the rebounding, plus the second chance opportunities. Do you think that makes a well-rounded playoff offense?
I think well-rounded is like the right word to include in that question. Because I think when you talk about playoff offense, what are like the three biggest, game slows down, court shrinks, and every possession matters, are like the three big taglines of like playoff environment basketball.
Right.
And, Julius Randle, turnover prone. Every possession matters. He doesn't really check that box. But the other two, the ISO scoring does, and his shooting this season, checks those boxes. Brunson, he, I think, checks all three of those boxes. He's very much built for playoff basketball, as evidenced last season in that other jersey he wore that one of us might know about.
Hey, it's true. Hey, it's the elephant in the room.
I knew it was coming at some point.
It's the elephant in the room that we got to discuss at some point, but we'll get there. Sorry, go ahead, Kris. You're good, man.
And RJ Barrett, definitely not there. I think he is someone who's going to benefit from struggling on national TV. He's the kind of person that's the fuel that will drive him to be a great player. Like, I'm not talking good. I'm not talking pretty good or very good. I'm talking great. I also acknowledge that I don't think he's close to there yet. But I've always been optimistic on Barrett, and it's because of just how he returns to his issues, if that makes sense. Like how he always addresses them, comes back, fixes them. Overall, though, the team, it's more than just those three guys. Even though the three lefties are pretty much the draw of everyone's attention. Grimes, quintessential piece, maybe Quentin-central piece. I should trademark that in the starting lineup. There was like beef on Knicks Twitter the other day about who came up with phrases first, so I actually have to go run and tweet that before.
That's hilarious.
Funny fan base, man. Anyway, Emmanuel Quickley, sixth man of the year candidate. Just a couple weeks ago, he was plus 21,000, which is exactly what I'm talking about when I say that a lot of the people that get paid to talk basketball just like don't watch the Knicks. They watch these other teams, which are awesome teams. Like, you should be watching the Memphis Grizzlies. You should be watching the Magic, kind of sprouting a bit. Like you should be enjoying these things, but you should also like just watch the games. There's so many times this season, like Stephen A. Smith was like,
crazy to consider that
Brunson.
The Knicks, someone is asking someone to watch the Knicks on national television.
They haven't deserved it. They haven't deserved it for a couple decades, about as long as I've been alive. So it makes sense that no one cares to watch them. It's like, oh, well, they're the Knicks. Because as someone that's a Mets fan, I know that vibe very well with these orange and blue teams. But when you look at just back to how this Knicks team is built, the ground and pound, right? I think Josh Hart and Mitchell Robinson as a duo kind of personify this team. They are going to out-hustle you. They're going to out-rebound you. They are going to steal and block the ball. They're going to deflect it. They're going to fill up multiple passing lanes at once, Robinson there specifically. When you take a look at, and here's why I think, yes, this is a playoff-built team to stop burying the lead. You take a look at Brunson, Barrett, Randall, now Robinson, now Quickley, those two as of this season. These guys are all jacked. Josh Hart, these guys are all completely jacked. Like they're really strong. Even if they're not tall, even if they're not long, they're very sturdy on the court. Like if you saw the play last night, drew the ire of Boston fans, understandably, but I really wholeheartedly believe there was no malintent. Josh Hart turned the ball over, running after Brown and Tatum on a fast break, and just like contact with both of them, knocked them both over. Brown traveled, dropped the ball out of bounds, and it was Knicks ball. Like, he's a wrecking ball. He is a human wrecking ball. He has many of the attributes that I admired about Deuce McBride, except he does them in a way in where he's a star at his role. And that is the point I was trying to get to the most. With the lens of ground and pound physicality, think about how everybody on the Knicks is essentially a star in their role. Brunson, his role is to set the tone, set the table, calm the pace or control the pace of the game, depending on how Randall's doing, and really, like, not babysit Randall, but be his rock. He's Randall's rock. And Randall can go out and be who I think has been the best player on this team this season, because of his recent two-way success. If he hadn't brought the defense like he has these last couple weeks, I would say it's Brunson. Randall's been there on both ends of the court. And when these guys like quickly can create, pass, defend, quickly 6'3" with a 6'9" wingspan, he's bulky. All the NBA draft Twitter nerd, boxes are checked, except he doesn't play for a team like Memphis, so can't be that good, right? But I'm now in my mentions, like people are liking my old tweets of like, I know I'd get killed, but I'd take quickly over like Maxey and Hero. And everyone was like, you are what's wrong with basketball discourse today. And like your generation, the fact that you're a 20-year-old saying this, like everything about this on Twitter is what's wrong with basketball today. And I'm getting people liking those tweets. Like, hey, look at you, go ahead and do it for me. But like when you take a look at quickly how he's built how he's built, even the guys that don't play, Jericho Sims, top 10 in box outs per game when he plays, like the Knicks have depth. All the depth matches a scheme. The scheme is ground and pound physicality. The highlight of the scheme happens to be isocentric offense because of the talents of Brunson and Randall and how Thibodeau feels he can best utilize them. Thibodeau maybe not the most ingenious, creative offensive mind, but I think the talent on this team has been good, and now the rating of their play backs it up. Like he's found a way to use this talent well. Quickly is no longer playing the 21 minutes a game that he was earlier this year. I remember talking to Andrew Claudio at Knicks Film School, and he and I have always differed on quickly. He much lower than myself, but he was saying he should be playing like 24, 25 minutes a game. Like those 4 or 5 minutes matter a lot when it's Deuce McBride or when it's Derrick Rose or when it's Evan Fournier getting the other minutes. It's not about quickly being some stud. It's about him being the best option. And now with the opportunity, he's shown that he's a stud. And the kid's a complete stud, and he has advanced the Knicks timeline single-handedly by being the 25th draft pick and being as good as he is. They would not – it's because of players like him that I didn't think they should have made the Donovan Mitchell deal, because I thought they would have a season like this. And so for quickly to come out a couple months after that, my boss at one of my jobs texted me when Donovan Mitchell had 71 and was like, how can I keep employing you? Like you're looking bad by the day. Like these games are why. These games are why, because you believe in what you've been building. You believe in your direction. The Knicks have a lot of high character guys. They have a lot of guys that can do pull-up shooting. Those are the two types that Leon Rose has. Even Alec Burks, both of those things. Kemba Walker, high character, failed attempt at getting a pull-up shooter because his knees were cooked. But every move this team makes fits those boxes, I feel like. And they're going in a direction that, to me, I'm not trying to make it a comparing thing, just like an example of a team that stars recently joined, and also an example of how stars aren't a perfect fix to everything. You had those 2019 D'Angelo Russell Brooklyn Nets that were a real easy first-round exit for a Ben Simmons-led Sixers team. Jared Dudley might have been the net of the series. I think that says a lot, right? But two superstars looked at that team and they said, this team has built a legitimate foundation to which we can add ourselves and improve what they have going on. And to me, you're looking at the young players around the league. Jaylen Brown, maybe not long for Boston. As new and shiny as, the number 35, the pickup in Phoenix is, he's had his fair share of issues when he lands in new spots. And the other star there, number 3, is, I'm not, older. He's like, could be my dad, right? So I think that situation, them totally wanting DeAndre Ayton around and wanting to keep him and loving how that's like, that could blow up really quick. Devin 100%. Booker was represented by Leon Rose. Utah blew up really quick. Guess who was right at the front of the negotiations? Ended up intelligently backing off. But who was right there when people said they didn't really have a package to be? The New York Knicks. There's a team in the Knicks division, has 2 stars, 1 rising star that I like very much. But one of those 2 stars is just, he's a little homesick. He's feeling the call of Texas, right? Right, Lauren? I mean, James is just, it's calling back to him. And I think the other Jay over there might want to get the hell out of there. So when you look at how the Knicks have built, and the reason I've totally distracted from S's original question is because 100%. I do think this team is. I did. Because I do think this team is built for the playoffs. I do think they can win a first-round series this year. I also think none of it matters. All house money. None of it matters.
Yeah.
They have all of their picks going forward. Look at the young core that they have right now. Look at their cap sheet and point to a bad deal that's expiring, like, not this offseason. You know, I think I'm sorry, in the 24 offseason. And that 24 offseason, Brown, a free agent, Booker and Embiid signed on the Supermaxes, but that's when the amount of years gets down where maybe talks this is all lining up to where something is going to shift, but the tectonic plates are set, right? The Knicks have done their job behind the scenes. And if you've been paying attention to the New York beat reporting, guys like, Mark Berman back when he was on the beat, have highlighted that, Worldwide Wesley was talking to Beal's camp and all these, they're always poking around. You hear them with Cat and Levine. Can't see them trading for either of those guys. They're calling every day. Why? To evaluate their own players in the negotiations, to get other they're just interested in that stuff. And they just kind of have been wiggling around doing their best to advance the team as they go forward. I think the team is built for the playoffs. I think it will be more built for the playoffs when there is a name brand star on the roster. That's when I think the expectations should really begin. Yeah. I think right now this is, to me, I said, I've made this comparison for the last couple of weeks. Knicks are a lot like Kings East to me. People have said that in a bad way the last couple decades. Now this year, I think it means something good. No one wants to see them in the first round. No one thinks they're winning the championship. And that's a good spot to be if you've got all your picks.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you said...
Well, listen, Lauren, hold on. Before we jump in here, I just have to say we have 12 questions here prepped and ready to go, and we have to throw away half of them. Because you've answered 99.9% of these.
It was a wonderful answer.
It's okay.
It was a wonderful answer, though.
Full thought out. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to just cut up that 10-minute segment just now and let it rock. That was incredible. Sorry, Kris. Lauren, go ahead. Do your thing. Let's cook.
No, I mean, it's incredible because I can't refer to them as Kings East because I think that this year they have earned the recognition that they're getting. But I think it's so fascinating kind of coming into this season, looking back a little bit to the beginning of the season and the questions around the Knicks. I would see questions online about is, going all in for the Donovan Mitchell, and we don't need to rehash that whole conversation, but the identity of this group is the right direction, going with the youth movement, or kind of going all in now because we do believe Jalen Brunson is that all-star, and just the questions continuing to surround the Knicks. And then you've got Tibbs in there, who I said at one point, I was like, I don't know that I have a whole lot of faith in Tibbs. I don't know that he's going to be willing to make the adjustment. And that was, my outer perspective. And he has proven that wrong. And so what I find to be so intriguing about this team is how they've all kind of come together and rallied around it. And they, like you said, everybody playing their role and being a star in their role is not something that just grows on trees, especially in today's NBA. And then you add the addition of Josh Hart, and it just seems like you said, you're poking your head around on the trade market. You're kind of pursuing all fronts while still improving and developing internally. And you're just setting the foundation, like you mentioned. And I think that the Knicks are in a really, really great spot, as much as it pains me to say, as a Mavs person, but as I'm watching this team, I do have a question lately. With the defense taking a bit of a dip, they're 18th since January 1st. They're now 14th overall, but they don't give a ton up at the rim. You mentioned earlier Jericho Sims with the box outs, Mitchell Robinson and his activity, even Hartenstein to a degree. But they do give up a lot of threes, and opponents are shooting 40% against them on those threes. Is that something that you maybe see being like a temporary issue, or is that, where are you at? How do you feel about the defense as a whole, and how much do you trust them?
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson had that surgery in mid-January on the thumb. And the Knicks were 9-6 in that span when he was out. So that's cool that they were able to have such a strong culture and foundation that they could put someone as inexperienced as Sims, slide him into that starting lineup and kind of get similar enough production to pretty much simulate a Mitch and have the other guys do a little bit more digging and find that will to just replicate the overall defensive production. But the truth of the matter is Sims is 6'8", 6'9". That's why he does the dunk contest. It's, he's not a 7-footer. He's not a 6'11er. Mitchell Robinson is 7 feet tall and very much plays like it. If you saw last night, took Derek White off the dribble and finished at the cup. That's a new one. Showed that once last season. And now we've gotten 2 of those this season. And it's like those little wrinkles, those little additions, I think really like Robinson is big for this team. And what he does allows the other guys' jobs to change. So like, that's the way I wanted to put it. So like last season you had Walker and Fournier funneling guys to the paint really easily for Robinson to take care of. Robinson was having like the worst, physicality year of his career. And it was all just a really bad combination. Didn't have a good season when he was playing. But this season he's been stellar in his role. Like was saying about Quickly, about Hart, about Brunson, Grimes. Like Robinson's been stellar in his role. I think the only guy you can argue that's not been a star in his role, only guys you can argue have not been stars in their role are RJ Barrett, who gets the ball a lot, does not have the efficiency to justify it if the Knicks were a contending team today. But they're not. They're one investing in their youth. And so it makes sense that RJ Barrett's not a star in his role and getting the minutes that he is. He should continue to get those minutes and continue to get that usage. Other guys, Obi Toppin, same thing. High pick in the draft, hasn't really been given a fair shake to start off. No one in the Knicks organization thought they were drafting a Julius Randle backup. That's how good Randle ended up being. So the 2 guys that aren't stars in their roles are recent draft picks or close to recent draft picks that are either working through issues or going to get to the point where soon they're developmentally far enough to have those issues to have to work through because they haven't really expanded their games that far yet in the case of Toppin. And everyone else is buying in. And that's super big to me because defensively, Brunson is not good. Lauren, you know this. You watch Brunson for a long time. He's not some stud defensively, but he's also not a sieve. Like he doesn't lose you a series on that end of the court, especially if the Knicks have a rim protector like the Mavericks kind of never did in Robinson.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know where Lauren stands on Brunson. I think actually Lauren, if you do have an opinion on the Brunson front when it comes to defense.
Yeah, definitely. The thing about Brunson is while he's deceivingly quick, which I think many people are seeing, especially now that he's playing in Madison Square Garden. People are seeing that a lot more. But he has a knack for where the ball is going to be. A lot of times he knows where, with his hands, where to either go in there and get the strip. But the biggest thing that he's really good at is forcing the turnovers when it comes to just stepping in at that last minute, taking the charge. And he's got a really great feel for the game that to me makes up for the fact that he is a little bit undersized. The quick feet and the overall just knowing where to be is where he can at least kind of make up that advantage. And I agree with the statement that, his size or his defensive lack is not enough to lose you a series, especially when you take into consideration his ability to sort of force turnovers and be in the right spots. I think he does enough to offset that, to not be a total liability on defense. I think that statement is always going to be overblown, but that's just the name of the game.
I will say also, the name of the game with Brunson and his impact on this team is just how much he's and it's not creating in the sense of like, oh, I am a playmaker, I'm going to be creating for others. It's the fact that he puts so much pressure on the defense by being this scorer. I made a video about it. Screw it, I'm gonna plug it. Go check it out on the SDPN website. It's literally about Brunson being this scorer, putting pressure on defenses, and then that way creating for his teammates, because the more attention that comes on Brunson, the better it is for his teammates, the better it is for guys like RJ Barrett, Quincy Grimes, etc. I guess my overall thought is, do you ever feel like the Knicks are too reliant on a guy like Brunson, or even to a certain extent Randle? And do you feel like that might end up being an issue come playoff time for this team?
The Knicks were too reliant on Julius Randle for his first 3 years on the team. That's the way to put it. I think Jalen Brunson is the answer to a question like that, not the question itself. You had Randle putting up. Now last year you heard a lot. Oh, Randle 20-10-5, 20-10-5, 20-10-5. And the Knicks just kept piling up losses. He kept piling up bad defensive efforts, bad, mentality showings. Like 2010-5 was not cutting it. It was bad. This season, he's playing the best basketball of his career. And having Brunson has allowed him to put more energy towards defense. I think he was really good on-ball defense in the 2021 All-NBA season for him. He regressed unbelievably last season, and I believed that it wasn't just because he was a jerk. Like, that wasn't my answer to that. My answer wasn't, oh, well, he's not trying because he hates us, the fans.
Right.
Like, that's what the fans were saying. I wasn't saying, oh, he's not trying because he hates them, the fans. I was saying, I think he doesn't have the energy to move on that end of the court because he is the offense. He should never be anyone's offense. That's bad. So let's stop doing that if we're the Knicks. And they did. They went out 2 years before, tried to get Chris Paul, went out last year, Kyle Lowry, Chris Paul. They've been trying to get this guard to take the ball out of Randall's hands to hold them over until they could get Brunson.
Brother, the Knicks have been trying to get a point guard for since
before I was born.
Yeah.
And specifically, they've been trying to get one for Julius all 4 of his years as a Knick. And in every offseason, they targeted one. And now, they knew they were getting Brunson down the line. But they felt confident in it to the point where they kind of lined everything up with it. And, it happened. So tampering charge included. And now Randall is a guy who has more energy on the defensive end of the court. I'm holding up a stat I prepared for this here podcast because I figured this would come up. The Coast to Coast NBA pod says that in the top 3 this season of best defense wise, meaning worst ISO field goal percentage, based on the opponent field goal percentage, the best ISO defenders, number 1, OG Anunoby. No surprise there.
Yep.
This podcast knows those abilities of his.
Yep.
Number 2, you won't like this one as much. My guy, Evan Mobley.
Hey, listen, Evan Mobley has a fan in me. Nah, don't worry about it. I don't. Like, you don't listen to the Knicks fandom Twitterverse as much as you might. I don't also. So go ahead.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Now, tied for number 4, Andrew Wiggins with Paolo Banchero. But before those two,
nice,
Julius Randle at number 3. So obviously the stat, not a million times reliable, but like number 6 is Rudy Gobert. Tied for 7 is Garuba and Jaden McDaniels. I don't think Randall's in particularly bad company there. I think he's locked in on that.
To your point, I think those type of stats are good when you watch the game and you're like, okay, what am I watching here? Let me find this good, comfy stat that kind of reaffirms what I believe or what I see. Those type of stats are good for it. And shout out to Coast to Coast. He's a guy I've been on the podcast. Shout out to him. Lauren, I guess for you, because I know, and I guess let's just address the elephant in the room here is the Jalen Brunson thing and him obviously going to New York. Do you now being in the position of having Kyrie Irving, having, why'd you laugh, bro?
I hate this start already. This is awful.
Well, look, I'm just saying, look, now you're in a position where I think, the Kyrie situation, the trade more so, was sort of a reaction to not retaining Jalen Brunson this summer. Mm-hmm. So I guess from your perspective, from a Mavericks perspective, how do you dissect or digest everything that has transpired over the past, 12 months, if you will, of, Brunson going to the Knicks, Kyrie coming to the Mavs, just all New York related point guard stuff. What do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, with Brunson specifically, obviously we all saw how it went down, and I think when you're talking about a point guard that exactly what he's going to bring to the table, but it's about what makes him so much better is what he brings off of the court, the leadership style, how Kris was talking earlier about how he's the rock for Randall and how his role or his job is to keep things calm. That sort of presence and just headspace and leadership style is because, don't get me wrong, it's Dallas, it's Luka's team, but having that kind of leader in the locker room, that value cannot be understated enough, or can't be overstated, excuse me. And so to me, it's apples and oranges when you're talking about trying to think about maybe bringing in someone like Kyrie Irving for the home run swing, even if it's for a year, whatever the case may be, whether it be Dallas or even at some point in the past when New York even entertained it. But when you're taking the gamble versus when you're looking at someone like Jalen Brunson, who year after year, ever since he entered the league, has given you reason and shown you that he can improve and develop and improve areas of his game that people doubted him on. Those are the players that you invest in, and those are the players that you can't just overlook. You have to be able to reasonably project value. And in today's NBA, this is something that I feel very strongly about, especially when it comes to roster construction, is that things change. We continue to see it year after year. Things change in this league on a dime. I mean, and we're seeing it right now in the news that's pumping out daily. So when you have
Lauren,
someone like,
you would
go for it. What? Go for it.
You would have hated the discourse on Knicks Twitter this summer. We can't, the fan discourse was like, we cannot as a team pass up on DeJounte Murray because stars do not become available often in this league. 3 days
that's
later,
just ridiculous.
Oh.
That's just
three
ridiculous.
days later, Kevin Durant became available and they were like, well, listen, that's not what we were talking about. We cannot pass on DeJounte Murray as a team because 25-year-old all-star guards do not become available often in this league. And then Donovan Mitchell became available 1 week after that. And it's like, the league is going to keep passing you by if you're not going to keep up with them. Like, this is how this goes. When I grew up a fan of the NBA, there used to be like the 2013 versus the 2016 image of Blake, Melo, CP, Braun, and it was like, wow, they're all on a different team from last time. If you made one of those today, it would be
it would change almost every year.
The average of different teams played for by these players was 3.2 in the time from the first to the second picture. Like, this is how this goes now. It's very, very different.
Right, which is why I think there's so much value in someone like Jalen Brunson, right? And don't get me wrong, there are other guys out there in the league like this. I think Tyrese Halliburton is probably the best example that comes to mind. But when you've got someone like Jalen Brunson, when you can identify the qualities of a good leader, somebody that, I mean, you can never predict loyalty, but somebody that you can just tell is going to be a great addition for your locker room, while also is a good system fit and is going to be complementary to the pieces that you have, the Julius Randle, the RJ Barrett, especially in the short term and long term. To me, that's almost invaluable. And so, yeah, when you're talking about the Kyrie situation, whether it be in Dallas and how they've kind of scrambled and are still scrambling to recover from losing someone like Jalen Brunson, I think Dallas taking such a dramatic swing for someone like Kyrie shows you alone the value that Jalen Brunson has in terms of just being a good leader and how much that hurts when you just take something like that and remove it from the locker room. Because Dallas was, I mean, going into this season, it was like, okay, you don't have Jalen Brunson, but you have Tim Hardaway coming back. You have Christian Wood. You have XYZ that are going to be able to fill that points gap that Jalen Brunson brought because he's not necessarily known for his defense. But we all knew that that was a load of crap and that what Jalen Brunson brings to your team is something that you can't just replace. And so for the Knicks, I think when you talk about their foundation, and especially as we're nearing the playoffs and they're getting ready to get this experience, this continue to build experience and develop these young guys, Emmanuel Quickly, like just Toppin, even Josh Hart, like all these guys that they've got, I think it's going to be instrumental to their development, their growth, in, again, both the short and long term.
Hey, Kris, let me ask you this, okay? So I'll go through a couple of the players. You just tell me flat out yes or no if they're going to be on the team in the next 2 years. Okay? That's it. Yeah, okay.
Ooh.
Julius Randle, is he on the team in 2 seasons?
2 seasons, meaning we're in the middle of 22, 23, so 23, 24, 24. Oh, see, that's a good one. I think the 2024 to 2025 NBA season is the first season that the Knicks will like have the stars on their roster. I think the 24 off season is when that stuff gets done.
Right.
So I'm gonna go yes for Randall for 2 years, but if it were 3, maybe a year into the first year of things, it didn't work out great with him. They kind of
Move off.
it. 2 years from now, I'm going to go yes. And to start this year, I would have gone no. But I would have said he would have been here for the rest of this season. Most people would have. He's good. I thought he'd be
So
good.
the answer is
I didn't
no.
think he'd be this good. The answer is yes, he'll be here in 2 years because of his play this season. Because of his play this season.
Okay, that's fair enough. RJ Barrett, is he here in 2 years? 2 years. No. Quick shake of the head, absolutely not. Okay.
No hesitation.
Quentin Grimes, is he here in 2 seasons? Quentin Grimes.
Yes.
Yeah, he's here. Okay. Interesting. We'll get to that in a second. Emmanuel Quickly, is he here in 2 seasons?
The answer was no before this season. The answer is yes now.
Nice. Okay. And I guess just to this is the guy who decision's going to be coming up this summer, but I guess just to clarify, Josh Hart.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, who are you shaking your head
If
at
it was
there?
Obi Toppin, I was going to say no.
Right. Okay.
Josh Hart, they traded the first for
They're going to
knowing
have to.
They're going to, yeah.
Especially the connection to Jalen Brunson and, all that. Yeah.
I think it's less of a they're going to have to and more of a Hart's going to want a number that they're probably going to be willing to pay, and that'll be it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. I'm interested. I'm very curious to see what happens to the Knicks. Obviously, them being the New York Knickerbockers, there will always be the discussions of whether they should trade for a star, whether they should do this, do that, what kind of moves they should make. I love the approach they've taken so far. I think you're in the same boat here. I love the patient approach, the fact that they've kind of done this in a way that feels natural to development. Adding a guy like Jalen Brunson gives you a bedrock, something to be sustainable and moving forward with. I would go out on a limb here and say maybe Jalen Brunson is like a Knicks lifer. Like I could see him ending. We'll see though. That's again in today's NBA. That's a lot to ask. Finish it off.
It is.
Sorry. Go ahead.
It is, and
Yeah.
I think that if you see, for example, if Rose's tenure with the Knicks ends, but he goes somewhere else, whatever, that could be like, Leon Rose was who signed. You see, those Woj tweets. This exec was who signed this player or drafted this player back for this team, so they're heavily interested in reuniting with them, and they're new to. That could be one of those things. So maybe not, but. If I had to guess, Jalen Brunson would be a Knick for the rest of his career, as like the rest of his prime years, at least.
Okay, I got you.
If we've began those,
Right? Yeah. Final. He's 26. He's got a little bit to go. Final thoughts on the playoff race that is going to be happening soon. You guys are 39-27, fifth in the East, like I mentioned earlier, potentially climbing up that ladder. You guys are only 1 game back of the Cavs. I'll just go next to the team, and you just tell me yes or no. Do you feel comfortable in them beating the Knicks beating them in a series? Boston, we just saw them last night. Do you think the Knicks have a chance?
no.
Okay.
Yes, I think they have a chance. I'm not comfortable in it.
Okay, but overall, if that was simulated 100 times,
I would pick Boston. If you asked me as an NBA analyst to pick a winner of that series, I'm clicking BOS. And that's that.
Milwaukee. Okay. Philadelphia.
This is to me the litmus test. If based on how Harden and Embiid are officiated in the playoffs, and based on if the Knick team is for real and brings it, this could go either way to me. I will lean Philadelphia because they are the team with the 2
Stars.
more recognized all-world talents. But the Knicks do have 2 all-star talents, and that would be a really fun series, especially because I love that McDaniels acquisition for them.
Yeah, I like that too. Okay, this is the matchup you guys probably will end up facing in the first round, and that's the Cleveland Cavaliers. How do you feel in that matchup? And knowing all the Donovan Mitchell stuff that we just talked about, so
I was gonna say Vince McMahon couldn't have come up with a better script than the Knicks Cavs first round playoffs. Like that is the most WWE fake. Like that. Like for all the NBA is scripted conspiracy theorists out there. Like start hammering this point. Like start. This is your this is your thing. The 2019 lottery and this now are like your 2 really big. The Knicks getting Donovan Mitchell in the first round of the playoffs would be very fun to cover as a basketball fan. I would have the ground and pound New York Knicks coming out on top in that series against a team who is more talented than them, but because they have not yet found that identity to lean back on, has struggled in volatile and hard environments like Madison Square Garden with having Garland and Mitchell lead them to wins. I think they're 0-2 in the Garden this season. I think Mitchell's combined shooting numbers in those two games are as ugly as I'm making them out to be. And the Knicks held the Cavaliers under 90 points both times.
Right. Yeah. I was actually in Cleveland while they were playing the Knicks in Madison Square Garden, and it was not fun. A lot of people at the bar were not very happy with that performance. So I feel you. I hear you. Either way, I am very, very excited to watch how these New York Knickerbockers shake out the season, shake out the next couple of seasons, what they look like, honestly. I mentioned those names because I'm curious to see what kind of, what's the temperature check on some of those guys. But Kris, anything you're working on, anything you've got coming up that you want to plug, go for it. Do your thing.
Yeah, I would say don't try to spell my last name. Just click the link that they'll drop to my Twitter. You can throw me a follow there. I cover the New York Knickerbockers, the NBA at large, and also a little bit of Fordham basketball. Just
nice.
A10 tournament coming up this week. Tune in, support the Fordham Rams. I have no, affiliation there, just the school I go to, and it's a really good basketball story. And knowing I'm talking to you two, knowing who's listening to this pod, I think you guys would admire the basketball story that is this year's Fordham Rams.
Oh yeah.
And aside from that, just stay tuned to my page for NBA draft stuff, because this summer will mark the return of the Draft Class podcast. We will be back. We will be analyzing the prospects, the many lovely prospects, may I add, in the 2023 NBA draft, which the Knicks may or may not select any of.
Right. Yeah.
Like they did last year when some crazy madman spent 12 weeks researching for dozens of hours a week on a draft class that the Knicks ended up looking at and saying, yeah, we're going to take a guy who was actually today let go from the team. So I'm really hoping they draft someone for my sanity. You should too. Check out Draft Class. It's under Knicks Film School. A great, great outlet and place to work. And check out WFUV Sports by the students of Fordham University for the New York sports world and the sports world in general.
Nice.
Check us out there as well.
I love it. Lauren, anything to say before we head out?
I am excited to see what happens with this Knicks team. I think they're one of the most fascinating groups in the league. And again, I keep saying the short term and the long term. And I think one of the teams that you can kind of bank on in the long term being a big player for the time moving forward is the New York Knicks. So we will see. We will see.
I think it's funny. You have Zion, Ja, and RJ, the top three picks in the 2019 draft. If you ask 30 NBA GMs today who the three biggest players will be in the next star trade, I think the Pelicans, Grizzlies, and Knicks are names that come up like a lot in those conversations. So we're kind of watching the cycle play out. Let's see how, cycle number 2 goes. It'll be cool.
Yeah. I mean, look, when you think of star packages, Pelicans, OKC, New York, Memphis, they are maybe even Orlando in a couple of years. Those are the teams to look for to make splashes. We'll see if they end up doing it. We'll see what happens. Who knows? New York obviously has the advantage here of being beautiful New York City. If you've never gone, go. Angelo's Pizza in Brooklyn is fire. It's really, really close to Barclays Center. I don't know if you've tried it, Kris, but it's freaking fire. It's phenomenal. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here at the Objective Basketball Podcast. We appreciate you. Kris, thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Follow hosts at Just S. Barahini on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.